Hey, y'all. I want to talk to you today about a churchism that I think is very important and one that I've seen over the years. And it has to do with when it's time to leave a church. Many years ago, when I was a youth pastor, I had a young lady in my youth group that every 2 or 3 months she would say, "Brother Jack, the Lord's just leading me to go to this other youth group." And when she first did this, it was kind of hurtful, and I was kind of worried about her. But what happened is that she would go to that other youth group, and she would get in there, and she would go there, and then all of a sudden, a month, 6 weeks, 2 months later, she was back at our youth group. She said, "Well, the Lord's led me back here." And what I came to realize was that what she meant by, "Well, the Lord's leading me to this other youth group," was, "Well, this other youth group's doing something that I think's really fun, or there's a really cute guy in this other youth group that I'm interested in, or something like that." And so she went over there, and then when those things exhausted their importance or appeal, she she was back. And so finally, I asked her one day after she had done this several times. I said, "Do you really think the Lord? Do you really think the Lord wanted you to go over there and then come back just a month or two later? Do you really think that that's how God works?" Now, she didn't really answer my question, but hopefully I gave her some food for thought. Because I see this not only in the lives of teenagers, I see this in the lives of adults as well, that they bounce from church to church to church to church. And a lot of the churchisms that they use are just excuses. Some of the things that I've heard: "I wasn't being fed. My feelings got hurt. They didn't have the music that I liked." Once again, when we look at all of these three reasons for leaving the church, I'll posit to you that none of those are reasons biblically to leave a church. The truth is that no matter where you go, it's not the church's responsibility to feed you. It's your responsibility to feed yourself. Wherever you go, you're going to find that your feelings are going to get hurt. And if you're interacting with people, there may be times when things are hard and difficult and you might get your feelings hurt. Wherever you go, they may sing a song that you don't like. But all of this focuses on a fundamental misunderstanding of what church is and what worship is. Worship is focused on God. And church is not primarily a place where you're going to be served, but rather a place of service, as we talked about last week. One of my favorite churchisms, though, is the one where the person says, "Well, you know what? I left that church and no one came and tried to talk me out of it." Or no one came and came after me and chased after me. So they just didn't care. Well, I learned a long time ago that when you come to me and you say, "Look, Brother Jack, the Lord's leading me to a different church," I want you to think about that for a minute. When you say the Lord's leading me to a different church, then who am I, even as your pastor, who am I to say, "Well, you know what? I know better than God in your life"? I've got to trust God to do what He's going to do. And I've seen people leave just like that teenager and end up coming back. I've seen that happen. But whether it's the idea of, "Well, you know what, things were just not the way I wanted them to be," that the music wasn't right, or I wasn't being fed. All of those things are just excuses to say, you know what, I'm just not comfortable with the way things are right now. And I understand things change, and that's hard. But the idea that somehow church is about me, and if I leave, people are supposed to come chase after me, and they're supposed to find a way to talk me into coming back. That's like games that junior high school kids play when they're experimenting with dating. It's very immature, and it's not a valid reason for leaving a church. Now, there are some valid reasons. And if you come across one of these, then you may consider leaving the church. The first one is doctrinal error. If the church is teaching things that are not biblical, now hear me clearly. I'm not saying if the church is teaching things that you're uncomfortable with. I'm saying if the church is teaching things that are in error doctrinally, that are unbiblical, then you should leave or consider leaving. If there are moral or ethical failings, you should consider leaving. There's been so much of this over the last several years that there's been a lot of moral and ethical failings in church leadership, and it's heartbreaking. And as a pastor, not only does it break my heart, but it makes me angry that leaders within the church are not living up to their calling, and they're putting a black eye on the name of the Lord and the name of the church in the community and the world at large. But if there are those moral or ethical failings, that would be a proper, I believe, consideration to leave the church. And then finally, I think if there's concerns about safety, especially the safety of your children. I know recently of a young couple that told me that they left their church because they had three small kids, and their church decided that they were no longer going to do child safety, child protective training, and they were no longer going to do background checks on children's workers. And they were concerned, and I think rightly so. Now, I wish we lived in a world where we didn't have to have child protective training. It's one of the most distasteful things I do as a pastor is teach the child protective training class. But I do it because it's important, and I do it because it's something that we have to have in order for parents to feel safe in trusting their children, even for an hour while the worship service is going on. And then background checks. The church, they said, decided that background checks were not going to be done anymore. Yeah, this is just standard operating procedure these days. That if you're going to be around children in any context, there's got to be a background check done. There must be. And so, if the church decides that that's not going to be done, then that leads to some questions of safety that would be a valid, I believe, consideration about leaving the church. But someone hurt my feelings. That's not valid. Jesus didn't say, you know what, if someone hurts your feelings, then just cut them off and run away. No, Jesus gave us a prescription for dealing with conflict. Well, they didn't sing the song that I liked. That's not valid. The songs aren't for you anyway, they're for the Lord. You see, the reality is if you're a member of a church, God placed you there. and you need to wait for God to move you. It's not something that should be done lightly. It's not something that should be done on a whim. It's something that should be done prayerfully, and something that should be done only when the Lord gives you leave to do it. Your church is where God has planted you to serve. And unless there's doctrinal error, moral or ethical failings, or safety concerns, I would encourage you to find a way to work things out so that you can stay right where you're at and deal with your issues. Because hear me, if you don't hear anything else, hear me on this. The problems you leave in one church will follow you to the next one until you deal with them. Cherish your church. It's not perfect, but get involved and serve and understand that it might be hard, but this is where God has called you to serve, and trust Him in it. God bless you.